Danny, where'd you grow up?
You're first supposed to say who you are.
Oh, well, I'm David Gwynn. I'm in Lubbock. I'm Danny's partner. I thought you were supposed to introduce yourself.
Okay. You asked, the question was, where did I grow up?
Where'd you grow up?
I was born in 1953 at Chinookville, Illinois, when Dad was in the Air Force. And 3 months later, we moved to Austin for my father to attend law school. And he graduated in 1955 and moved back to his hometown, Lubbock, Texas. Actually, Idlewood was his hometown, but he moved back to Lubbock. And he and Madison Souter, his lifelong friend from Idlewood, began a practice that lasted over 50 years, Hurley and Souter.
What kind of practice did they have?
Well, they were, I would describe them as small town, rural attorneys that did everything from divorces, wills, and probate. And back in the early days in Lubbock, being a dry city, they did a lot of bootlegging cases. And so during those days, they could try 4 bootlegging cases a week. And Dad and Madison tried a lot of criminal cases, bootlegging cases.
I guess you heard a lot of stories from your dad and from Madison and being around their office. So, when you were at Coronado High School, when did you start thinking about college?
Well, I think I probably started thinking about college when I was in elementary school, and I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer because the 3 men I respected most in my life was my father, Madison Souter, and later Judge Bill Shaver. It was Hurley, Souter, no, Shaver, Hurley, and Souter was the law firm, and those 3 men were the most impressive to me. And back then, lawyers were well respected, and the community respected my father, and so that was one of the reasons I wanted to become a lawyer.
Your dad, despite, gosh, they came out of where, St. Joe?
They moved during the height of the Depression from St. Joe, which is north of Fort Worth, to Lubbock to become sharecroppers during the Depression, during the Dust Bowl. So you can imagine the difficulty that he and his family experienced then.
Well, didn't he have 6 or 7 brothers or sisters?
He had 7 brothers and sisters.
And at 14, didn't he have to?
No, he graduated from high school at Idlewood, and I believe he lied on his application to join the Navy, and went to the Navy at about 16, 17, and then.
Where did he go in the Navy?
He was all over. Of course, he was out in San Diego for training, and then he was in the South Pacific on aircraft carriers and destroyers, until the war ended.
So the GI Bill had a pretty big effect on changing the Hurley family station in life.
Yeah, Dad, because of the GI Bill, was able to go to Texas Tech undergraduate, got an accounting degree, and then he was drafted into the Korean War, or about to be drafted, and joined the Air Force and so, that's where we were. And he was stationed in Albuquerque in Illinois, and he got out of the Air Force and went to University of Texas Law School, also on the GI Bill.
Well, now, he's been in the military twice, and he's obviously strong and powerful, but your senior year, did you get to do something maybe a lot of senior boys would like to do but don't quite get to do about your living arrangements?
Well, I thought I was pretty mature and pretty independent, and I had just received a new car for graduation that I was going to get to pay for by working.
What was it?
It was a 1971 Buick Skylark, but I decided that I needed, because I was so mature and wise, that I needed to move out. And so I moved out my senior year of high school, and me and 4 other guys lived in a 2-bedroom apartment that my recollection is we got evicted on graduation night for a keg party. Or we almost got evicted. We were talked our way out of that.
Dan, as you've tried a lot of cases and you try them well, and you seem to have learned about people from all over, but you grew up in Lubbock. Did you have a job in summers during college that kind of let you see the country and meet a lot of people and be independent?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to work for a college telephone directory company, and so I worked in 35 states during my college career during the summers, and sold advertising for UCLA, worked in University of Washington, in Bellingham, Washington. I worked in Charleston, South Carolina, Atlanta, all through the Midwest, and got to learn about the art of sales and how to meet people and how to talk with them and try to be persuasive.
Talk about getting into Texas Tech Law School.
I'm up in Bellingham, Washington, 8 miles from the Canadian border, and I'm selling college advertising. And I basically resolved myself to the fact that I wanted to go to Tech because I knew I'd end up practicing in Lubbock and thought it'd be best for me to make those contacts. I was just about to move to San Antonio to go to St. Mary's Law School, and I got a call from the dean of the Tech Law School that said, "We've just had a terrible tragedy," and I can't recall if the person was institutionalized or frankly, I can't recall if he died or what, but there was a spot that came open, and if I could be home in about 18 hours, I could get that last spot and begin law school 18 hours later. And so I drove nonstop from Bellingham to Lubbock to become the last person admitted. And quite frankly, when I got there, I found that they'd called a lot of people before they could find somebody that could make it in 18 hours.
Well, based on your dad's advice, when you started law school within the legal field, what kind of career path did you think you were on? What did you want to do as a lawyer when you started?
Well, Dad wanted me to be a tax lawyer.
Why was that?
Because that's how you obtained a higher status and how you made really good money representing wealthy people, he believed. And so I think through the 3rd tax code change in my law school career, I decided I didn't want to have anything to do with tax law. And so I broke it to my father, and he said, "Well, then you need to become a trial lawyer. And the way to do that is to go to work in the DA's office, get you some trial experience."
Who was your first boss as a district attorney?
Alton Griffin was my boss for 6 months before he got defeated by John Montford, who became my boss January 1, 1979.
I take it though, just in 6 months, Mr. Griffin made a heck of an impression, because I remember eating lunch with you at Everett Seymour in 1996 at J&J's Barbecue, and here y'all are, respected men, capable lawyers, and you look over my shoulder, I can tell somebody's coming, and y'all all sit upright and put your jackets together and tuck your elbows. Quick, quick, it's Mr. Griffin. What kind of presence did he have? What was that about?
He was I think the nickname in the office was he was the Golden Eagle, and he was the person that we were all scared to death of, and he ran a tight ship, and he taught us that your word is your bond, and you go into the courtroom and you fight hard because over, you shake hands and you move on, and you always respect the verdict of the jury no matter what it is.
Talk about that affecting your career and your idea a little bit. When people went to the DA's office back then, what was the attitude or the philosophy of most of the lawyers who were in a DA's office, at least towards other lawyers?
Well, there were very few career prosecutors at that time. Everybody that went into the DA's office planned on becoming in private practice, and so you knew that you wanted to make contacts, you wanted to get to know all the judges and do well in front of the judges. But prosecution was not the be-all and end-all. Then in '79, John Montford recruited career prosecutors to the office. It was a big difference from those of us who were not going to be career prosecutors.
Once you got into the general practice of law and doing criminal defense, was there anything from your childhood with your father that you felt kind of maybe set your orientation to really make your blood pump harder and heartbeat a little faster about representing people who were perhaps less fortunate or that society hadn't treated quite as equals?
Well, you know, Dad grew up as a sharecropper's son in the Depression. And so he personally experienced being a very, very second, third, or fourth class citizen. And he experienced the treatment of people who treated him as if he was inferior. And that stuck with him, and it's something he instilled in me and my three brothers to treat everybody with dignity and respect. And I recall my father representing African Americans with serious criminal charges and always treating them with the highest dignity and respect, and how the African American community really held my dad in high esteem. And those were lessons that I knew that were important in life.
Did you ever get to go to Washington, D.C., and what did you get to see?
Actually, in 1964, Mom and Dad loaded me and my two younger brothers into the car, and we drove to Birmingham, Alabama, and went to the 16th Street Baptist Church where the three young ladies had been murdered by the Klan just 8 months prior. We then went to Washington, D.C., where we sat in the peanut gallery in the Senate as they were voting on the Civil Rights Bill. My dad thought that was important for us to see. And then, of course, we spent time visiting the grave of John F. Kennedy and observing the eternal flame, which I can still see in my mind. Those were things that Dad thought was important for us to do.
Well, Danny, you've always, you're the oldest son. You were all-city defensive end football player for the Coronado Mustangs. You've always had a big personality. You were a Fiji, and that's no small thing in Texas Tech. That's a special breed of cat. You're in general practice. Things are going okay. When does it really, what changes for you in terms of criminal defense?
Well, Bill Wishkemper, who I'd worked with in the DA's office, and Tim Evans, who was also a Fiji at Tech, who was my college roommate's older brother's best friend. I got to know these guys, got to spending time around them, and they introduced me to TCDLA in about 84, 85. And I have to say, joining TCDLA was the most important career event that ever occurred to me.
did that crystallize over a case in Lubbock where everybody kind of had to come together regarding the scientific evidence of the local medical examiner, Ralph Erdman?
Yes, Ralph Erdman was a expert for Travis Ware's office, and he was not an independent expert. He was owned, bought, and paid for by the DA's office, and it became apparent that he was not doing what he was supposed to. And Millard Farmer was appointed to represent young Hispanic male in the Panhandle, and they subpoenaed some police officers to testify about Ralph Erdman and what he was not doing. And these police officers honestly confirmed that it was a joke, that Ralph Erdman was the medical examiner for the entire Panhandle. And very soon thereafter, Millard Farmer gets indicted.
A couple of police officers.
Two police officers, Pat Kelly and Bill Hubbard, got indicted for tampering with witnesses.
And that was telling the truth that Dr. Erdman wasn't examining these body parts and doing what he was supposed to?
So I kind of recognize that when Bill Hubbard comes to me to hire me, I recognize he's my ticket to the big time. This is a big story. And I recall getting a call in my office about 2 or 3 days after that. Can you hold for Mr. Goldstein? This is Diane. Well, yeah. Mr. Goldstein gets on the line and says, you know, I'm the incoming president of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and current president of Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers. We would like to offer you some help. So I stood up and said, yes, sir, Mr. Goldstein. Come on down. Come on down. And so he came to Lubbock, and Cynthia Orr and I, Steve Loesch, Jeb Stone from Chicago, Skadden Arps, the richest law firm in the United States, began seeking an injunction in federal court to prevent the unlawful prosecution of Millard Farmer and these two police officers. All of which, if you read all of the case law and the history of federal jurisprudence, you know, that ain't gonna happen. That's an impossibility. But after Judge Robinson gave us 2 days in a room almost this size, we all sat down. I'm sitting by Racehorse Haynes, and Travis Ware's sitting right beside him, and he slaps Travis on the chest and says, "You still carrying that sidearm, Travis? You still packing heat?" in front of Judge Robinson. And so anyway, she says, well, I'm going to give you 2 hours. 2 weeks later, in a driving snowstorm, the judge granted a restraining order enjoining the illegal prosecution of these 3 individuals. The end result of that is we settled that case. Jerry Goldstein, Captain Goldstein, settled that case for $300,000 that was divided among the plaintiffs. Jerry and Cynthia spent all of that time, effort in getting Skadden and Arps, Jeb Stone. They all did that pro bono, and it was an amazing thing to watch.
As I recall reading the pleadings and applying for that temporary restraining order, they brought in constitutional provisions and civil RICO statute provisions to enjoin this prosecution.
Yeah, it was quite a unique way of bringing this prosecution, and the reason that the counties decided to settle is the court found that there was a RICO cause of action, and I think it was a lot wiser to settle than drag that on.
Danny, you've had a lot of cases that are memorable to a lot of different people for a lot of reasons. Some had big publicity, some nobody will ever hear about. Tell us a little bit about the case up in Muleshoe, where they had a confession on capital murder with Big Boss Hog DA, and
Joseph Carpenter was a young man who had served 10 years in the military, had come home living in a little shanty town, and his next door neighbor was murdered. And Joseph was accused of being the murderer because he had a camera pointed over at the neighbor's bathroom window, and because he had pornography in his bedroom. And that was enough for the local DA to say, yep, he's the killer. And so 3 weeks before trial, they tell us they're not going to seek the death penalty. So we try the case as a minicap, and our big problem was Joseph had confessed not once but twice to the case. Richard Offshee, who Jerry Goldstein suggested to me, Jerry Morris suggested to me, came and testified in that trial to why this was a classic false confession. And after about a 3-week trial, our client was found not guilty. And the local judge wasn't happy about a capital murder defendant being found not guilty, so he held me in contempt. And about a month later, we had 30 lawyers from Lubbock and from TCDLA assist me in the trial. Bob Hinton, one of my closest friends, defended me in that accusation.
Whether it's a murder case with DNA and a confession, or I remember when we first really kind of got to be friends, you had a case up in County Court Law number 2 representing a man who was just, I think he ran a weed eater for Texas Tech. He was on staff being accused of indecent exposure and flashing himself. Some tech girl who swore, yes, that's him. Remember Freddie Hernandez?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm still in my little closet of memorabilia. I've still got his hat that was used to identify him as the culprit in the indecent exposure.
What's some of your favorite cases? Just whether it was the people or the case or the justice, because the other side was so crude or tacky or petty. What are some ones you look back that whether you got the not guilty or you beat the punishment or you just tried it well, what are some things that are pretty memorable for you?
You know, there's almost too many for me to talk about right now. But, you know, just recently, representing a black man in Midland County, Texas, accused of aggravated assault of a peace officer who has dreadlocks down to the middle of his back, and being able to convince a jury of all white, very conservative people that our client was not guilty, and for them to make such a rapid decision that they were able to return a verdict in 29 minutes of his being not guilty. Those and many, many others are very pleasing to me.
Danny, you've always been a very kind person, forceful, and some people just don't see everything to you. I know you have a wonderful pastor at the Presbyterian Church, but by no means are you some onerous Bible thumper. Why do you think you chose criminal law, and why do you love it?
Well, it's because of my influences from Dad, Madison Souter, Bill Shaver, from people like Bill Wishkemper and Tim Evans and Jerry Goldstein, and what they do, and that they do without compensation, and their passion, their love for what they do. That's why I've been led to this point, and why TCDLA is so important to me is because if it wasn't for TCDLA, I would have never been able to develop these relationships, to network with all these people, and meet, you know, my best friends in life, meeting David Gwynn through TCDLA.
Danny, I think one of the first things we got to do in court together when you weren't representing me was in '96, one cold spring morning. I got to stand with you when Judge Cummings issued sentence on Lewis Jones. The federal death penalty is being used for the first time. I remember later Judge Cummings pulling me aside in the hall and saying, hey, I was talking to Judge Warnick. We never got our CJA 23. We never got a bill from Danny on Lou Jones. Did you do that appointment?
Yeah, I did, with Carlton McClarty. Spent a lot of time on that case. Very, very difficult, sad case. And our client ended up getting executed despite the protests of Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison and many, many others. It was an incredibly difficult case, but we lost that case, and our client was executed, and I just didn't feel right about filling out that bill, so I never did, never will.
You feel pretty good about it?
Not going to take a penny from the federal government for being involved in that.
Why would you tell somebody to think about choosing criminal law?
Well, young Frank Sellers, who is sitting in the room with us, you know, sometimes it takes getting knocked around a little bit by the system. But once you personally experience that, you can develop a passion for wanting to help others. I know I've done it. I know you've done it, and I know that Frank has done it, and it's just it's a calling. It's maybe divine intervention. I don't know, but it's something that I love, and I love helping young lawyers get pointed in the same direction.